Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the fifth and final day of the GlobalFest 2016 Human Rights Forum presented by TD. My name is Brian Francisco, and I'm the program manager and host of the event. I would like to acknowledge the fact that we are on Treaty 7 lands, as well as Métis Treaty Number 3, the City of Calgary, the Province of Alberta, and the Government of Canada. So let's get started with the GlobalFest Human Rights Forum presented by TD, the Refugee Experience, Finding Success in Different Stories. So GlobalFest started as a speaker and panel series that is an excellent platform for sharing experiences, knowledge, and practical solutions necessary in addressing issues of racism and discrimination. So today's topic involves how many Canadians base our international identity on our compassion and fairness. Recognized globally, these values are at the core of the Canadian Domestic Refugee Protection System and the Resettlement Assistance Program. Both programs are praised by the United Nations Refugee Agency. A refugee is different from an immigrant in that an immigrant is a person who chooses to settle down permanently in another country. Refugees do not have the same choice. They are forced to flee. Canada resettles refugees to save lives and to provide stability to those fleeing persecution and seeking relief. Canada's resettlement programs are respected internationally because they provide permanent residence as a long-term solution. In keeping with its humanitarian traditions and international commitments, Canada accepts between 10,000 and 14,000 identified refugees each year through both the private and centralized sector. It is important to note that we use the term refugee. We are careful not to assume it as a label or defining characteristic of a person's identity, but to remember that it is in reference to a very particular experience which many individuals may share or identify with differently. We are here to discuss some of the stories behind what it means to be a refugee and what it means to reframe, transform, or identify beyond that term here in Canada. So without further ado, let's introduce our panel and our moderator. Our moderator has worked for over 33 years with major media organizations including CTV and Global. After an 18-month recession-imposed hiatus from work, she started volunteering her time for an immigrant services agency in the Southeast, which eventually led her to becoming the operations and marketing manager for the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society in 2011. Please welcome your moderator, Ms. Patricia Gallagher. Our next speaker is a doctoral student at the Werklund School of Education at the University of Calgary. She is currently selling a collection of short stories titled Stripped to the Bone, Portraits of Syrian Women, which was released in May 2016. You could find more information in the foyer, actually. One of her causes in life is to amplify the voices of the marginalized through her writings, poetry, and translation. Please welcome Ms. Ghada Alatrash. And our next panelist hails originally from El Salvador and came to Canada as a government-assisted refugee in 1984. He has a degree in agricultural engineering, a 2-year diploma in biological science, and a 2-year diploma in Anabaptist theology. He first became involved in helping refugees through the Mennonite Church in Red Deer and was eventually hired by the Mennonite Central Committee of Alberta at the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers as both a chaplain and a refugee sponsorship coordinator in 2003. He now resides as the program and associate director of MCC Alberta. Please welcome Orlando Vasquez. And last but certainly not least, our final panelist was born and raised in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He holds a master's degree in sociology and is a community development expert in criminology and social disorganization, as well as an active human rights activist. He arrived in Canada in 2011 as a refugee and has since been an active volunteer for the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society and is currently the chair of the Calgary Refugees Day Organization Committee. Please welcome Modest Inzenga. All right, so we'll be having a panel discussion for about an hour, at which point we will turn the floor over to you guys for what is always an exciting live Q&A. So without further ado, I will hand it off to our moderator and our speakers for their opening statements. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Well, as a former broadcaster behind the scenes, not in front of the cameras, and a marketing professional, I'm always looking for the story. And not necessarily because I'm Snoopy, but that certainly does help. But as human beings, even in this world of social media, computers, texting, and 140 characters worth of information, it's still our personal connections that are the most meaningful and the most valuable. So with that in mind, I'm pleased to be here today to hear the amazing stories of our esteemed panel. I also have had the pleasure of working with Modest and hearing him speak, so I'm quite sure he will be his usual amusing self. And I also had a chance to meet Ghada and Orlando, equally engaging. So I'm sure you're going to be in for a very interesting afternoon. So let's start with some stories. Ghada, share with us your story.
So I am Syrian Canadian. I am not a refugee. I immigrated to the United States in 1986. I will share more of my story with you, but my presence here today is because as a Syrian woman, as a Syrian Canadian woman, I feel like I am an insider to my Syrian heritage, to my Syrian culture, and also an insider to the Canadian part of things. And I feel a role and a responsibility to share my view as a Syrian-Canadian woman. That hyphen really is where I belong. And what I've brought with me is lots of voices, lots of stories, lots of human voices from Syria and from a refugee experience. I co-chair the Syrian Women's Club of Calgary, and I've been working with refugees on different levels as well. So I do have some things to share. And on a final note, I am a student at the Werklund School of Education, and there is quite a bit of quantitative data, lots of numbers about refugees, but the qualitative, the human voice is what I hope to bring today. And a very powerful quote that I've taken from my studies at the education department was given by a professor, a native Canadian American professor. His name is Thomas King, and he says that he writes so that you don't say in the years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you had heard this story. And that's what my role is for you today, is to share some stories with you so that you've heard them.
Nice, wonderful. Orlando.
Thank you for inviting us, or me, to be here. Thank you for the audience to come and hear us. I'm a former refugee, political refugee from El Salvador. I hope to share some of my journey to where I am here right now, and the blessings and the obstacles and the barriers that we face as we try to integrate into the Canadian society. I think I've been involved with helping the refugees to come to Canada for a while. And lately, with the Syrian crisis, we as an agency, did lots of refugee sponsorship. And as a former refugee, I can identify myself with them and see what they're going through, and hopefully make their lives easier in Canada.
Fantastic, great.
Thank you.
We're certainly going to talk about
Yes.
more about that.
Thank you.
Modeste.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Today I'm not telling you how I got lost in Calgary, because now I know all the corner of Calgary and suburbs, so I will tell you how I got to know the corner of Calgary and going around. I remember the man called Devanchi Lovato. He used to be a guy who used to buy the chained animals, give the master of the animal or the hunter or the poacher the money, and then after that, he will go and free the animal to go again. So I was wondering what happened if that animal would be caught by the hunter again or the poacher. What was his intention? Did he have any monitoring system to see what happened to the animal when he freed them in the wilderness again? I came here to Canada as a first immigrant, or as called refugees in general. I didn't have choice, and I didn't have to make any change or to do any modification to my life. The objective was that we are taking you to Canada, and especially in Calgary. So today I'll be sharing with you what it takes for a first immigrant or refugees to be integrated in a Calgary society, what is the challenge and what is the way forward so that immigrant refugees, they can be success in this beautiful Calgary. Thank you.
told you they're a great panel. Aren't they excellent? So in Canada, and Brian talked a little bit about this, in Canada and elsewhere, we have two groups of immigrants. One group who immigrate by choice, and while others are forced by war or persecution to seek refuge in another country. So let's talk a little bit about what can be done to identify the differences between these two groups, and should we even be doing that? So Ghada, you talked a little bit about that in your introduction.
Yes, and there is quite a bit of a difference. There is a theorist, a Palestinian professor, the late Edward Said. I'm sure many of you probably have heard the name. And he identifies the difference. And I brought it because he so eloquently, after many, many years of working with Palestinian refugees, he identifies this difference, and he says that although it is true that anyone prevented from returning home is an exile, some distinction can be made among exiles, refugees, expatriates, and immigrants. Exiles originated in the old age practice of banishment. Once banished, the exile lives an anomalous and miserable life with the stigma of being an outsider. Refugees, on the other hand, this is so powerful. Refugees are a creation of the 20th century state. The word refugee has become a political one, suggesting large herds of innocent and bewildered people requiring international assistance. There is an unhealable rift between a human being and the native place, between the self and the true home. It is a sadness that cannot be surmounted. I consider myself an exile. My father chose to immigrate. We were obviously not as blessed as Canadians. You know, I want to go on that human level. Canadians do not have the need to be forced to leave a country. When we left in 1986, we did live under the same dictatorship of the father and the son. My father wanted to give us more horizons. He wanted to give his children a future. He wanted to give us what I have today, and hence we left. But we were not a part of a herd of people who were forced for their lives, running for their lives, out of a country. So as much pain and as much longing as my father felt, I felt less. Obviously, I integrated in the society. The children integrate a lot better than the parents, than the first immigration. But as much pain and nostalgia and longing as he felt, he was not shattered into pieces when he had left his country.
That's really impressive. In terms of that, pick up on that piece, because you did come as a refugee.
Yeah, I can say out of experience, when you're forced to migrate and being uprooted from your comfort zone, and there is no choice, you just have to go because you want to save your life or the life of your relatives. Being an immigrant, you choose somehow, you have the resources, and you choose to move for a better life. As a refugee, you don't know where you're going. You don't know what life is ahead. As an immigrant, you do. You have resources, you have a language, you can integrate. But as the two groups landed in Canada, I think we faced some of the same issues. Homesickness, for example. The livelihood that we left behind, even though I choose to come, but I like to be there, but I can't. As a refugee, we bring trauma with us. Trauma carry with us for years to come. As an immigrant, maybe not as much as us. But as we landed in Canada, we all face the same issues of integration, discrimination. How do we navigate the system? The immigrants have a little bit of a hand on because they have the language and the resources to move on. We have to depend on others to help us. And immigration settlement agencies or churches or special groups that decide to help us, it's a very different approach. But as we move along in this journey of integration, I think we face almost the same issues anxiety. How do I move on? How my kids can go to school? You know, where am I get money to pay rent? And so on. But I will say that immigrants, when they choose, they have a plan. As a refugee, you don't have a plan. You're forced to grab whatever you have and leave, literally. And you hope that somebody will pick you up somewhere and bring you to a safe country. There's still millions left behind that will never come here.
Or anywhere.
Or anywhere.
So what do you see as those subtle differences between the services that are being provided for the refugees and for the immigrants?
I think the success, you will have more success if you're quantifying integration with an immigrant because of the language and the education. For a refugee, your success, it will come 10 years later. So agencies need to adapt that you're kidding to a privileged group, the immigrant, in a way. And you have to do it differently. Don't put them together because the refugee will require a long-term support.
Okay. Modeste, weigh in on this because you came over as a refugee. You also are working in resettlement.
International Declaration declares refugees after crossing 800 meters from the country or from his comfort zone, and he feared to go back because either his persecution or harm on his body. I used to be a United Nations High Commission officer in charge of emergency office in the region. I used to take critical decisions on millions of people who are forced to run away from their home, their comfort zone. And most of them, they were victims of torture and each and everything. Let alone, I was like their voice. I should draw the plan how each and everyone is going to get the described World Food Program of only 200 grams of food every day. How is everyone is going to get 20 liters of water that he's going to use in 1 week? In most of refugees camp, even that 20 liters is very hard to get because of the circumstance. And based on that, the political platform is not willing to see those people's success, and economical world also, they want to gain from those crises. Let alone, I myself, because of, I refuse to live, as my name say, modest, and become a troublemaker, asking everyone, what are you doing? Why this is not being done the way it's supposed to do? Why this and this and this? I crossed that border and walked 800 meters, and I declared myself to be a refugee. I lived as a refugee in the country called Kenya for more than a decade. That voice I used to raise up, I needed someone to request even a pen to write my name. In most of the street, I should not say my identity. I should not go in public like this. I developed stigma and symptoms. I lost hope. I lost everything. I was chained. I didn't have any media etiquette anymore. I should not hold a microphone and say this and this, what is going on. I developed what we call mental complicity disorder completely. So the success of refugees and immigrants is totally different. An immigrant who decides to come to Canada will have the time to do the research and say, okay, this is me and my family. I'm going to Canada, and specifically, I'm going to Calgary. But what is to Calgary? Education, they have this university, they have this and this, they have Valley College. This is where I will start, and this is how I'm going to approach the situation. Now, I will say this, I have solved this, I'm going to buy a ticket. I'm going to apply for the visa or green card or whatever, and then I come. A conversion in refugees depend on a group of people, different committees, from all level to the settlement officer, to the UNHCR, to the Canada developing country, and so on, to the embassy, to decide this person, we are taking him somewhere, this and this and this, and he does not have any option. At the end, he or she will find himself that he is here in Calgary. I arrived in Calgary on 8th of March. It was quite cold, but sunny. I didn't know what that means. And I looked on the window. I said, it is sunny. I should go anywhere I want in the town. I disappeared from the resettlement house, and that's how it was for the whole day. So the integration of refugees here to Calgary or in Canada depend on you, people of Calgary, and thank you very much for your support and for your contribution toward the resettlement and integration of forced immigrants.
So, Modeste, what helped you get through those difficult times? You said that your mental capacity was impacted. You had all kinds of trauma. What has helped you get to the point that you are now? And we're coming to you guys, so be ready.
Once a journalist in my country asked me, what do you want to change in Congo? I said, I want to change myself before I change anything. That is what I did when I came here to Calgary for the first day. I said, yes, this is Calgary. Canada is a developed country. Everything is done different culture, different mentality. I have to change, and I accept what I can do and what I cannot do, and I see what I can change. But the first change started with myself. I said, I have been carrying this burden in my heart. Nobody have disclosed what I have gone through, the torture that I went through. This should be the beginning and the end. I'm going to throw it to someone else who can help me to achieve my goal and my objective, and see that if I can make Calgary the new home and new environment for me, despite that it was quite new and bad. It was bad environment for me. But I say, this should stop. I'm going to change myself. And then I throw my burden, which was on my shoulder, to my counselor, and told her, hey, this is what I have been going under through. This happened to me, this and this and this and this. I want to be this anymore. I want to have freedom of movement, freedom of speech. I want to speak my name in public. I want to post my picture on Facebook, on media. Help me. How can I do this? How can I say my name in public anymore without hiding, say, oh, I'm not Mr. Modest, I'm not this and this, I'm this and this and this and this. How Calgarians are going to react when I say that I was this and this and this and this, and now I'm this and this and this. So by accepting myself and changing myself, that is how I achieved to be a real man that I am here, and that is how I become a very good speaker in front of you.
I told you what you'd be in store for, right? Orlando, what are some of the common myths or stereotypes that surround that word refugee? And I know Ghada touched a little bit on that. So could you take that a little deeper?
Personally, when I came, as I was learning the language, many Canadians, I landed in Red Deer, small town mentality also. They usually will say to me, now you're here. Now behave like us. And that's very shocking because I don't know who you are. Right? I just landed. I am trying to learn the society. I'm trying to find ways, how to integrate. And all of a sudden, I'm putting this burden on myself that I have to be like you. And I think that's the wrong approach that the civil society takes towards refugees or immigrants. We all bring gifts. We all bring ourselves. And that's what enriched the society. Trying to stereotype who you are and trying to us to make that jump into a stereotype, I think it's not healthy. The other thing that I heard a lot is, as I start working with refugees, front people say that they cost too much money to the system. I have to say that after 32 years, I have paid my dues. And mothers and Ghada and others. And it's an investment. I think we need to do more in highlighting that this is an investment for this society, if you look at it that way. Now, that these people are going to bring more and enrich more this society. So those are the two things that I find most of the time when I'm working with refugees, but also when the civil society comes to me and say, why are you helping refugees? Right. They cost too much. Yeah. We have too many people in the street. It's two different things, totally different. So we need to more educate the public and the benefits of being compassionate and humanitarian, but also too in the long term, I think it's good to bring different people into the country. It enriches.
Great, thank you. Ghada, the Syrian situation brought many Canadians to band together, as you know, and to have the Syrians begin a new way of life in Canada. What would your observations be of the humanitarian response, not just from Canada, but even worldwide, to what's going on in your home country?
So I have to first touch on this point. I usually refuse to talk politics because it's just a very dirty place to go, to be honest. And I don't think any political analyst right now has really an answer for all of this. But we have to just touch on this point. The refugees here today are a product of a real problem. And those refugees, the humanitarian response is helping those refugees, but it's not curing the problem. It is not correcting the problem. The roots are getting more and more rotten, and the problem still exists. The humanitarian response to the refugees has been different in different places. Canada's probably 30,000 today, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 30 plus. Germany has taken in, 300,000. The US has not stepped up to its role. It really differs from one country to another. But again, there has not been an international will to resolve the problem. These refugees do not want to leave their countries. They do not want to leave their familiar grounds. They were happy in Syria. I see Saima there, and Saima is an amazing woman who deals with the refugee support group here in Calgary, and I'm sure that she also has touched on this, and the same people that she's dealing with I've also met, and they're in pain. They have lost their belonging. They have been uprooted, and so the humanitarian response has differed. I think Canada, let's talk about Calgary. Calgary has been a wonderful place to receive and host those refugees. The refugee support groups have been wonderful. Again, Saima is someone who has had great weight in this endeavor. And, I want to just carry forward with a point here. How could the humanitarian response be even more so on a Calgarian level? I am a Rotarian, and there is a program that we have created in the Rotary Club of Calgary that's called Friendship Program between Syrians and refugee Syrians and Calgarians. And this program has been so fulfilling and so rewarding. These refugees are, as has been expressed, they're very anxious, scared people. They've been dropped in a foreign land. They are very uncertain of their surroundings. And then the Calgarians are also, not certain what to do and where to go with that. And these kind of programs, these kind of support groups build those bridges. And at the end of the day, what the result is, again and again, is that we're all the same and we're all humans, and it universalizes the human suffering and the happiness part of it. I think this, just 3 lines of a poem that comes from the refugees, from the Palestinian refugees, addressed to the world, written by a Palestinian poet. I'm going to read just 2 lines in Arabic because I want to disrupt the narrative that is constantly dominating our lives here. So in Arabic he says, وَنَحْنُ نُحِبُّ الْحَيَاةَ إِذَا مَا اسْتَطَعْنَا إِلَيْهَا سَبِيلًا وَنَرْقُصُ بَيْنَ شَهِدَيْنِ نَرْفَعُ مِئْذَنَةً لِلْبَنَفْسَجْ بَيْنَهُمَا أَوْ نَخِيلًا. And what that says, and we love life if we find a way to it, and we steal from the silkworm a thread to build a sky. To build a sky and to fence this departure. When we hear the voices of refugees, as Calgarians, as Canadians, as humans in this world, I think it is an immediate connection, an immediate natural response for us to embrace them, to house them, to give them that support that they need. And so I encourage everyone here, reach out to them, establish those friendship programs. When I came to the United States of America, a neighbor across the street, her name is Lucy Musselwhite. Mrs. Lucy Musselwhite was a woman who had white hair and who was an American who lived in a wooden house. They're different from the Syrian houses. And she came and knocked on our door and she brought us a carrot cake. That carrot cake, until today, every time I remember it, I can smell, I can taste, I can feel this woman. And when she passed away, we mourned her like we did our grandmother. But she was that bridge that we needed. So the humanitarian response, let's be that bridge, all of us, to those Syrians or whatever refugees or wherever they come from.
That's why I brought Kleenex, because I always get really emotional when we hear these sorts of stories. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, and especially for those voices. Orlando, I read in your bio you're a parent and a grandparent. So let's talk a little bit about your children and your grandchildren, who I'm assuming have, if they weren't born in Canada, have mostly been raised in Canada. Your grandchildren certainly would be raised in Canada.
My 2 daughters were born in Canada.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that experience and how that maybe changes family dynamics a little bit, but also your children will have no reference point for what you went through. So share with us some of that.
Just today I was reviewing that question and I was trying to write something. And I came with this concept that, we're Latinos, that's our framework, the Latino framework culture, right? And we landed here, I met my wife here, both struggling how to integrate. In the middle, we have 2 girls. And so the first thing we did was the language. Our native language, the Spanish language. That was the first thing. And the second thing was the food. So we, as much as we can, we always got beans and rice and tortillas at home. And that became our identity as a family. And so out of that, we can talk about what life was back home. My daughters don't know much about my life story. I have tried to tell them, but it's pretty difficult sometimes. But we made it through this journey with them. And now my older daughter is married to a Canadian from Sweden. My younger daughter is dating a Polish Canadian. And it's different. It's like we feel at home. They feel that this is their home. But I think all my friends or the community that I was with, some of them are struggling with this because it makes you don't want to bring home here. You want them to identify with this society, but also remember where we come from. But that is their life. They were born in Canada. This is their home. I'm not going to change that. But I try to remember then that where we came from, we have tortillas, we have beans and rice. So our biggest meal sometimes needs to have that. So we got chicken, beef, whatever, but that basic food that we grew up, my wife and I grew up with, is part of our identity. So that may make my life easier with my daughters, being a Latino man and very protective. So, but, you give the foundation at home, they have to go into the world, their own world, not mine, their own. And they have to find it. And they did. They're glad they have the language, Spanish, because I make sure they had it. And they're glad they can eat our food, so they don't feel the strangers.
So not many trips to Taco Time, because you get it at home.
No, we do it at home.
Excellent. Modest.
Yes.
How can we add voices to create awareness to what the survivors of torture, which you are, survivors of even just being in a war zone, what still needs to be done to talk about that?
Canada and Calgary, especially, you are very generous. You know how to give. When I came here, I was overwhelmed with the hospitality that I was shown and information that I gathered. Just one advice that I should say in general is that we need to reduce our standard of living and increase our standard of giving. We have the scenario where people, they come with the scar of war-torn, where they come from. Those people, they have left all their belongings, political, social injustice, and body injury, they are still in their mind. And up to now, international community, they have never set up any committee anywhere else in the undeveloped country where they can look on issue, and at least those people, they can come and share what they went through and say, yes, this can be done. There is no justice. There is, like, in my country, there is no way you can exercise justice for the people who committed humanitarian crime, because most of those people, they are on the power. Others, they are rich people. Others, they are just bogus or a group of gangs. There is no way international policing or international human rights can reach those people so that they can be prosecuted. But is there any way forward that the person who survived that ordeals can be in a comfort zone, and he's being ensured that, look, you are here, you are safe, this will not happen to you again, and you are in a free country. I want to share this experience when I came. I thought that I'm free and I'm in peace, and I started looking for my family. Lucky enough, my mother that I learned that she was killed 10 years ago, I found that she made it. She went in Angola. She's living in a refugee camp. My sister and my niece. So I made an effort, whatever I was working in a warehouse, whatever I could get, I should send it in Angola so that they can live, they can afford to buy the food. But later on I found it was very expensive for me, because Angola is the first city in the world where life is very expensive. Not expensive because life is good, but it is expensive because the city is the city of gangs. So everything is very expensive. I decided to remove the family from Angola and rent an apartment for them in Rwanda, which is the neighboring country with my country. And I thought that was a critical decision and good for me and for the family. They accepted the idea. But 6 months later, my mom was seduced, and Since your country is just there on the border, and your husband had factory, everything, you have money there, you have money to the bank, why are you living in this poverty in this country of Rwanda? You can cross over. People who are renting, who are in your house, they will give you a rent. You will ask justice. My mom was persuaded and she crossed the border. She went, she visited some friends, they give her idea. From the border, on no one zones, my mom was attacked, raped to death, and then people who raped him, they sent me the picture on my Facebook. So I felt like the world is ending, but again, what should I do? I can't go there. I can't call anyone. No justice. No one I can call. What I requested was to request human rights activists in Rwanda to represent me so that the picture that they are posting on the media can be removed completely because I'm the son, and this one is disturbing me when I see the picture of my mother and how the video, how she was raped and how she was killed. And I cannot reach the people who did that, even if I know them. Again, I decided to move on. So, Calgarian, you are so good. We are lucky that we have where we can meet and talk about our challenge, but more are supposed to be done. A new immigrant or a new refugees is overwhelmed with information and with goals and objectives. To help those new immigrants or refugees to achieve those goals is to reduce their expectation. We expect more from you and we get less. So if service providers can concentrate on basic need, then concentrating on the wants of the people, now the intention and pressure of living will be low and integration will be very smooth. Because there is no need telling a person who came. He was born in a refugees camp. 25 years he has been living there. You start telling him a goal and objectives of going to Calgary University to pursue master degree and PhD and so on. That is like putting a heavy rock on his head. First of all, he doesn't not write even his name. I'm lucky I came here, I knew how to write. I was speaking my broken English, but can you imagine somebody from the village in Congo who doesn't know even Swahili, who speaks only his mother tongue? And when he come here, he go to Bovary College. This is the courses that we offer, this and this and this and this and this. So the service providers, they fail refugees by not identifying their needs. Instead of, they concentrate on their want, which is not necessary.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ghada, and I'm going to get you to pick up, Ghada, on something that Modeste was actually referring to, which is refugees need a champion, right? And you guys have all kind of touched on that, the support that you get, the support that you've had from this community and other communities. So, Ghada, how important is that personal champion?
It's key, I think, to integration and into assimilation into the society. Again, Mrs. Lucy Musselwhite was our champion, right? In the programs that are being created, that bridge between the Syrian or the refugee period and the Canadian, that bridge is really championing a future, a relationship, and integration and assimilation. And when that happens and the actual refugee becomes a part of this community, then there is hope not only for the refugee, but also for the community. So really that champion is key to connecting the refugee to the society that they are in. It is a responsibility that I think should be put on the shoulders of every one of us here. sure, there, as has been stated before, refugees maybe are a weight to the system. Maybe they, the system is already overweight with its problems. But there is a responsibility for us as humans to step up and to give, right, and to help. And I think this country, because of what it is and all the wonderful things, that it offers, it is, in my eyes, it is a champion, to this whole refugee crisis. So we can go on that level, on the personal level, but regardless, it's a responsibility that we have to all take on our shoulders and contribute, to a better place, a safer place for all.
So can you let us know a little bit about what with your Rotary program, what are some of the refugees telling you about that experience?
Oh, it's been wonderful both ways. So, for example, I'll give you a name. So Barb and her husband are now looking after a young family, Michelle and his wife, and they exchange visits. They taste each other's foods. They listen to each other's music. That Barb has taken Michelle to the Calgary Flames games. She's taken them to the theaters. She's taught them how to use the public system here. She's taught them things that we take for granted as Calgarians just because we know it. But for someone who's, imagine yourself. I always try to turn it the other way, maybe to make it clearer for us. Imagine yourself right now, having to be, God forbid, forced of this country and just thrown in the middle of Syria. No language, no cultural, etiquettes, really no skills to do anything. Where do you even start? I wish if we could all put ourselves in the shoes of these refugees, I think we would all step up, to helping them. And so going back, the response has been very fulfilling on both ends. Frank came to me. He's a Rotarian. He's an older Rotarian, maybe in his, mid-70s. And he told me, I'm very, very anxious about this. I'm not sure if I can take it on. Do you mind for us to have a trial phase? And I said, sure, and I knew in my heart that it was going to be fine, just fine. But there is this anxiety. There are these walls, these barriers of fear that we've built and divided each other as humans, with. But when Frank stepped up and took on this other family, he now cannot wait for the opportunity to introduce them to more things. So really, it's just all these walls that we have built that could be dismantled completely if we give it a chance. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, same question for all three of you. I'm going to start with Orlando. So immigration has certainly been a focus in Canada since after World War I. Some people create legislation and mandate things. There's a whole bunch of different methodologies. What's being done to make sure, if there is being something done, to make sure that immigrants are not facing racial discrimination, nepotism, and academic degradation, so that we can all share a piece of that global cake? What's being done?
With the refugee crisis, there was a lot of media. A lot of people got involved in the process of helping. I think that also created a good educational tool for the civil society to understand what these people were coming from and what needed to be done. A lot of the people that came forward to help refugees have become advocates of the people now. And they're going to agencies and the government to advocate to change legislation. There are cases of discrimination with landlords, So the people that have taken over this go and talk to the landlord and change things. Mm-hmm. A champion, an angel or somebody that cares. And I think it started at the grassroots levels. Everything that society changes started at grassroots level. Countries do legislation because grassroots people like us claim, we demand it or we advocate and eventually say that's a good tool to do. when it comes to immigration, I'm glad for the current government what they did with 25,000. I think is an amazing move of compassion. I think we shouldn't stop there. I think we should have a way to respond to humanitarian crisis around the world as Canadian government. And I think it's possible to do it. Maybe not 25, maybe 10. But we need to keep showing up to do that. And the humanitarian space is the gap is closing. Many industrialized countries are not doing their share. And many industrialized countries are closing their doors. So only few countries are trying to respond. And I'm glad we're in Canada. I'm glad the Canadians are responding. And I think we should not stop.
Why do you think there isn't that international will?
Because of protectionism and keeping safe. All boils to economics many times. What the economic benefit or disadvantage or risk. I think Canada has invested a lot in refugees and immigrants, and we can show that it's paying off. Many European countries used to be like that, and now they're closing their doors. And I don't know how long it will take, how many generations for them to realize that they need people. So.
Modest, same question. What's being done to make sure that immigrants are not facing racial discrimination, nepotism, and academic degradation?
I think Canada Constitution is the best that we have in the land, on this planet. And our human right charter is very clear, but I'm not going to talk like Trump, who said that the system is rigged.
Good.
For me, I will say that the system is controlled. So I need your voice and the voice of others to see that new immigrant, they don't face racial discrimination and they share job market. But we have a long way to go because capitalism system, they have created their own way of protection, and monopoly is very rampant in Canada and in Calgary at large. Now, because of that, they created another world that you need a Canadian experience. And that Canadian experience, to get it, you need it to work. But where that person will work, if the society is not accepting them so that they can gain that experience. So at the end of it, you will find that the person that the government spend a lot of money and so on to bring here to Canada, he will be a beggar for another decade or another generation. It will be sad if an immigrant will start a generation here, and that generation will be on welfare entire their life. That will fail Canada. You will be failed, you people who advocate for human rights, if you will not address this. We need to work together. We need to move forward so that the national cake can be increased and we can share all of us and all of it together.
Ghada, same question.
So I think quite a bit has been said, and maybe what I love about this country is that no one gets away, with discriminating, right? And it might be a longer battle for some, and some have to endure a lot more than others. But at the end of the day, the fabric of this country is human rights. It's anti-discrimination, and one of the ways that we can make certain that this continues is by educating those newcomers, by providing what your agencies and other agencies here in town, the educational programs to inform people of their rights and to inform people of what should not be done, against them and what they can do about making certain that they live a dignified life here. So education is a huge part of it. Our children are also ones, I think the children of those immigrants are going to be key for those immigrants too, because they will know their rights much more than the parents, and they will fight for their rights. The second generation immigrants like myself who have lived here are very aware, acutely aware of what it means to be discriminated against, and I will fight for it with my teeth. And I know at the end of the day I'm going to win because I am living in this country as a Canadian citizen, and so I'm going to make sure that my daughter also knows this, who is in this audience, and basically educating those newcomers of their rights is key, also making certain that we, Calgarians, now I'm going to speak as a Canadian, not as a Syrian, me as a Canadian, make certain that when I see something off and when I see someone being discriminated against, that I inform them and I take on their cause, because it is my cause as well. Mm-hmm.
Pretty amazing panel. I think we've got, what, 10 minutes? Where's 5 minutes-ish? Okay. So the topic was about success. So let's actually talk about that. I'm going to stay with you.
Okay.
So what kinds of things define success?
Okay, so I'm going to, because this is the last question, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to just take advantage of this and end on a poetic note.
Excellent.
Yeah. So actually, this is a happy poem for a change.
Good.
But, you know, I will sum it up in success is basically bringing a smile, bringing comfort, bringing hope for these refugees who had left, many of them had left hope behind. If they did not leave a murdered son behind, a murdered sister behind, their hope was left behind. So trying to bring back hope for these people, to give them a spark of hope, and to get them, so this is one of my favorite poems in Arabic. It is called, "We have on this earth what makes life worth living." And if I can see a refugee recite this piece one day here in Canada, then I have succeeded in my mission to make them feel like there is hope again. And so I'll just read a few lines from this poem, and I hope that one refugee will tell you this poem one day. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. I can be emotional. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. تردد إبريل. رائحة الخبز في الفجر. أرى امرأة في الرجال أول الحب عشب على حجر. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. April's hesitations, the aroma of bread at dawn, a woman's opinion of men, the beginning of love, grass on a stone. And the poem continues. If I can hear this one day from a refugee, then I have succeeded.
Oh, that's lovely. Lovely.
Thank you.
Orlando, success.
In the Western world, you see success as what do you achieve or how much money have you gathered. As a former refugee, I think I measure success how well or how integrated I am in the Canadian system, and that I'm able to call Canada home. Not that I renegade my whole history, but I can walk, I can integrate, I can participate, and say, yeah, I'm Canadian. And when I travel abroad, I can say, well, I'm Canadian. I don't have blue eyes, I don't have all that, but I'm Canadian. I have something that I was invited to, and I'm able to get in and participate.
Thank you. Modeste.
You want me to answer that question?
I do. Very much.
Okay. For me, what I call success is the knowledge of knowing your needs and the knowledge how to get it. I count myself amongst successful immigrant, new immigrant in Canada after 5 years. Despite that, I don't own a house, I don't have a big car, and I don't earn a big salary. But I identify my needs every time, every morning, and I know how I can get those basic needs. And then I try to minimize my wants because the scene of the world is changing every day. If I have something, Samsung Galaxy 5 today, tomorrow there will be Samsung Galaxy S7, S what? So immediately we help our beloved people, our community, that our basic needs, they are being catered off, and we are happy. We have the provincial government which is trying to do everything that to see that every Calgarian can get food on the table. That is the most important. The rest of things that people are fighting for is just vanity. We cannot be satisfied of it. We never count success because of how many degrees that we have. Because right now, I know so many professors, so many doctors who are driving taxi, and they spend a lot of money achieving those education, but now, are they counting success? How much loan our students, our kids, they are taking for community college to be educated, to go to university? At the end, how many people are being employed in their field? Most of them, they end up again going in the warehouse, pushing carts like others. So our success depends on our needs and the goals to achieve those needs. It does not depend on our wants at all. That is just vanity of this system.
Now, I know that part of the format allowed for closing statements, but I think those were pretty amazing closing statements. So I think we're okay with going with those as closing statements. Awesome. I'm just going to quickly wrap up here, Brian, before you take over. I just want to say how privileged I feel to be on the stage with these people. I'm always impressed and amazed the more that I meet our clients, the more that I'm in the community and meeting individuals like you. That was really wonderful, and like I said, I'm glad I brought Kleenex. Brian, over to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we get into the Q&A, please, one more hand for Modest Inzenge, Orlando Vasquez, Ghada Alatrash, and Patricia Gallagher, your panel discussion for the fifth and final day of the GlobalFest 2016 Human Rights Forum. Thank you so much. All right, so just like the previous 4 days, we do have a bit of ground rules before we go into the Q&A. If you would like to share with us some information on some topics that you would like to see for next year's forum, or some feedback on how we can make our event and program better, please find some surveys inside of your daily programs and give them to a volunteer wearing a GlobalFest t-shirt for collection later on. Your feedback is very important, and it helps us how we can serve our communities better. For your questions, please find our volunteer runners in the aisle with the microphone. Please keep your questions to within 20 to 30 seconds. It's the fifth and final day, so please, let's just get along, you and I. If you have a story or anything, please share it with us afterwards. Let that be, that face-to-face communication be your medium for that. As well as, please don't touch the microphone, and make it as close as you can towards the microphone runner as you can. So who has the first question for us? Frank Latorco from CJSW 90.9.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say what an amazing panel we had today. I learned so much. It was very informative and very moving. So I can't say enough about the panel we had today. So my question, first of all, I just want to make a statement here. A list was just recently put out by The Economist publication about the most livable cities in the world. Calgary ranked 5th most livable city, and Damascus, Syria, was the least livable city. Yet I know many refugees and immigrants who have lived here for years and years, and for whatever reason have fallen through the cracks here in this city, and they yearn to go back to their homeland. And I think that's true for a lot of people on the panel who know this kind of experience. But what is the biggest thing we need to do to make them feel more connected and more engaged in the society that they've been living in for years? Thank you.
Who wants to take that one on? Okay, Modas?
Socially and economically, Canada, we are on track. But Canada system need your contribution and my contribution so that we can maintain this status. We, all of us, we are proud to be on the land of Canada. And I do believe, and I have experience, evidence, and exhibit how many people they strive to step on the land of Canada, but it is impossible. So we should not get things granted. However, on political platform and economically, there is a cartel. I felt sad when I read that statement that Canada and Calgary is the best city to live in, and still our young generation, they cannot afford free university education, and yet there are other countries like France, like Belgium, like Germany, where university education is free. What do we lack if we work day and night? I don't see it clear. The pressure of living is higher than what we get. For you to make it easy that you are living a decent life, you have the power to spend and you have the power to save. But the system is regulated that you will work and sweat, you will survive, but you will never save. And since we are living in a free corruption country, no matter what you are doing, at the end of it, when you retire, you will find that your retirement cannot afford you to go for a vacation 6 months, unless you did otherwise. So we are having a lot of pressure. This is not only for immigrants, it's for everyone. It is not choosing what group. You have the same level and standard of living, and the pressure is even higher for those who claim that they are earning more and more, because spending is our sickness, is our cancer in Canada land.
Thank you for the panel. I'm touched by all your stories, and I just wish to offer a small extension, particularly to Orlando's tortillas and beans and rice, all of which is excellent. I'm going to answer you with pierogi, halapshi, and farmer sausage. As your background, I'm a descendant of the Russian Mennonites,
Yes.
who, without the revolution, which will be 100 years next year, right? 1917. I think about my parents and my grandparents who made the immigration, and they were immigrants, but their stories sounded more like refugees and arrived here without the support of what we're offering and learning today. Further to the tortilla story, they lived in a cloistered environment, as you probably know the history given your background, when they arrived here, and that was their strength. I heard stories that I should always marry within the community to maintain that pure ethnic value. And I can say that now, coming 100 years, it doesn't happen overnight. If we integrate into society, that is not likely to happen. It may, but it doesn't always. And it's still valuable, and we still take those gifts. Thank you.
Thank you.
That side, sir.
All right, my question is for everybody there. So I came to Canada in 1998, almost 20 years here, and I'm still living in the street, in shelter, master seed, and this is my ID. And I'm educated. I went to Catholic Immigration Society, and I did my link there. And until I did my grade 12 here in Alberta, and I have many skills. I worked in many, many places, but still, I'm still jobless. I do drop my resume everywhere, looking for work with sweat and blood. Nobody ever gave me that job with all this skill I acquired here in Canada. And I'm still living in the street. I have 2 daughters. I have no home. I applied to all subsidy housing or something like that. Nobody. It's going now almost 4 years. If Alberta or Canada is the best planet or place on the face of the planet to live, why am I living in the street for 20 years? I'm a refugee. So it's the government of this country brought me here. They're not caring for me. So I don't know. What can I say about that? By hearing everything people have been saying here. And I attended this workshop since July until today is the last day for this reason to talk today. Thank you.
I'll maybe take a little piece of that in that, you know, Modeste did talk about people who fall through the cracks. And I would personally like to just talk to you offline if you're willing, rather than to try and get into the specific details, which I don't have. So that would be my offer to you, is that we could have a sidebar conversation. Yeah,
Yes.
Your problem is not individual, just because you are refugees. Homeless is a provincial concern, or even it can be a government concern. I myself, I don't get it clear. When you have this international identity that we are living in the best piece of land on this planet, and I find that there is someone who is on the roadside begging 50 cents, then I say that something wrong in our system. When you find someone that cannot get shelter, which is the basic needs, and it is under declaration of Canada Constitution that everyone should have a place to live. And right now, we are still having homeless people who do not have where to spend their night. I call it that there is someone who is sleeping on his job, or there is something which is being cooked, because I don't find it clear. It is not a matter of racial, it is not a matter of discrimination, it is not a matter of nepotism, it is a matter of that people, the government, and the other service providers, they are not communicating and they are not addressing these issues. So some people, they are still sleeping on their job, and I think is a concern that as Calgarian community, we need to address. I always go to Calgary housing with the same issues with the clients, and then they say, oh, your client is not qualified, he cannot get a subsidized house. Give me 5 reasons why this person cannot get a subsidized house. Or they say, oh, the criteria, this and this and this and this and this. This is just bureaucracy that you are creating. Yes, we have shortage of house, as they say, but how many estates are being developed in Calgary, especially in Alberta, every year? Right now we talk, Savannah community, that 6,000 unit house they're being built. Is it hard that the city of Calgary, Alberta government cannot provide a piece of land so that we end this issue of homeless for once and all?
Okay, I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll go for closing statements.
Yesterday's panel discussed the labels of immigrant and refugee versus Canadian. When do you feel that new Canadians achieve the level of integration required to shed the immigrant refugee label and instead introduce themselves just as Canadian?
I have lived in the West for 28 years. I visited Syria up until the revolution every single year. I don't call myself Syrian. I don't call myself Canadian. I introduce myself as Syrian Canadian. And like I said, there's the Justin Trudeau's father introduced a multicultural act that introduced that hyphen in between. So I'm very proud of identifying as both East and West, as both Syrian and Canadian. I believe that when we are in that category, we're even more whole, we're even more worldly, just being one or the other. So I hope that the new refugee can, or the new visitor, or the new immigrant, or the new exile can one day identify themselves as both instead of one. And I think, as was said before, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years of living here and of learning the new ways. And, it's a two-way street, right? But again, I hope that my children will also identify themselves as Syrian Canadians, because that's just more whole, more complete.
Okay. Any final rebuttals? Okay. We'll now turn it over to our panelists and moderator for some final closing statements on the topic.
Who wants to start? Orlando?
Thank you for coming and listen and hear a glimpse of our lives and how the journey has been for so many of us. Regarding labels, we are labeled because of the circumstances that we're in. And so we're labeled refugees, because that's the definition. That's what you say about the gathering of all these people. But as we landed in Canada, we landed immigrants. That's our category. The program that we come is a humanitarian compassionate program for refugees. To take the refugee label, I wish we can take it as we integrate. If we keep having that label in our front heads, then integration is very difficult, because you always pull yourself away from that opportunity. Not that is ideal and a dream society, but we all face difficulties in life, here or back where we come from. But we should take the labels away and call ourselves as who we are. We're Salvadoran Canadian, Syrian Canadian, Native, whoever. But the stigma of being a refugee for life doesn't allow us for the society to look as the same, and for us to look at, I always need help. We need to get away from that concept. And part of the education with the groups that we do, and we do refugee sponsorship, is that they're no longer refugees. They came under the refugee program, they landed. Now, can you help this immigrant to integrate? Thank you. That's it.
Modesto? Closing statement?
Thank you very much, Calgarian. I was hungry and you feed me without clothes, and you give me what to put on myself. I was thirsty and you give me water to drink. I'm very humbled to be here, and hospitality that you continue to show to the millions of refugees who seek a new home in Calgary and in Canada at large. We cannot solve all the problems of human being because if one person is born, billions of problems are created. But for the best that you have been trying to welcome newcomers, trying to show them the way so that they can success, so that they can afford living. I'm very humbled to be here, and thank you again. Nothing else I have to say. I'm very overwhelmed with your hospitality.
And as a writer and a poet, I'm actually going to turn my time over to Ghada with the hope that perhaps you could continue with that poem. Would you?
Oh, I'd love to. Yes. And I do want to say one thing that perhaps I can leave you with. One of the most amazing and most important, most valuable, materialistic things that I own is my Canadian passport. Many of you have been born with that. I have been honored with that. It has changed my life on so many levels, but I don't take it for granted, and I have a responsibility that comes with it to help those who are not as fortunate. And on the poem, thank you. Thank you all. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. April's hesitation, the aroma of bread at dawn, a woman's opinion of men, the beginning of love, a mother living on a flute's sigh, and the invader's fear of memories. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. We have on this earth what makes life worth living, the final days of September. A woman keeping her apricots ripe after 40. The hour of sunlight in prison. A cloud impersonating a flock of creatures. The people's applause for those who face death with a smile, and the tyrant's fear of song. We have on this earth what makes life worth living. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. Thank you.
I can't speak.
She's done.
No,
okay,
I'm done.
She's done.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, on behalf of our sponsors, this was the 2016 GlobalFest Human Rights Forum presented by TD, the Refugee Experience, Finding Success in Different Stories. My name is Brian Francisco. I'm the GlobalFest Program Manager and host. This has been the GlobalFest 2016 Human Rights Forum presented by TD, and we will see you next year. Thank you.